just as things are warming up, and I realised that you can see my legs down there. I should get rid of that. That's better, no leg action. So what am I doing tonight? Well, on the video that I did a couple of days ago, I did a live stream where I went through a lot of prep work for a Dungeon Crawl Classics game. And oh, hi Florian, thanks for mentioning the sounds working, that is handy to know. So yeah, I did about an hour and a half where I put together a game. So what I did was sketch out in front of me stuff like this, where I was doing a sort of a map. I was working through the adventure, and I started to write the adventure up as well in Google Docs. And in particular, I did this small layout, which is kind of small. I could get a close-up on that if I go to the GoPro. So yeah, I was writing up this, which is very sketchy on here in terms of this being a general setting for the adventure, where I had up in the northern area a dwarven mine. I had a sort of human village called Cliff's End, and then I had a section in the middle here which was like a large canyon, and in that canyon there was a large, unusual, strange cube, which was the sort of center point for the game really as a dungeon. And then I started to fill out that dungeon as well, using various books from the company called Goodman Games that write Dungeon Crawl Classics. And one of them was this one, Monster Alphabet, which has a load of monsters in it basically, which you can fill up your dungeon with. And there was another book that they've got, which is called, well, this is a bit shiny, so go to the other view. Yeah, this one's called Dungeon Alphabet, and this one has stacks and stacks of things in it to sort of fill a dungeon up. So between drawing the map, using these books, I started to populate that dungeon. But what I've decided to do today was slightly different. I mean, it's still mapping. I'm going to draw out this map in a better quality so that I can then scan it eventually and then drop it into the adventure too. So what you can see also over here is this box over in this corner is a small Raspberry Pi, if I can get a better view of that. It's just a single board computer I've got in the corner here, but I'm running a version of Linux on there, and it's essentially a tiny computer where I have my applications running, which I can switch to it now. And here it is. So basically I'm running a desktop with a version of Chrome browser, and this is the name of the adventure I'm writing. So it's called the Beneath the Valley of the Ultra-Knolls. In fact, what I haven't done yet is show the sort of namesake of the game. I haven't put those into the dungeon yet, but they'll be coming soon as I work through. So occasionally I may drop back into here to show some of the preparation going on and write-up of the adventure at the same time. And my ultimate aim is just to make this a free adventure for sort of free download on Drive-Thru RPG. It'll be a lightweight sort of adventure, but I hope to fill up enough of it to make it crunchy enough to use. So yeah, in the formatting of this is in Google Docs, so it's nice and easy to do. And yeah, that's what I've been aiming for, is to write up. And today my focus is to try and get this drawing done and see how I get on with that. So yeah, that's going to be a bit different. So these were hex pads from a company called squarehex.co.uk. I will put the link to them on the video as well. But I got a bigger hex pad, which I'm going to use because I want to be able to scan this in A4. I've set this one up. This is a 2 centimeter square hex pad grid. I'll get that keyboard out of the way because I won't be using that for a little while. And I'm going to basically transpose this over and draw it out in a little bit more detail. I'll need to change my glasses to something where I can actually see it zoomed in a bit better. So yeah, these must be 1/2 centimeter grid. Let's measure that on these small pads that I had. Yeah, they're 1/2 centimeter hex. These are 2 centimeter. So I'm just going to drop this in front of me and then sort of draw it up as I work through, and try and come up with various ways of making it work out for me. So without further ado, I shall switch glasses over to close-up glasses, and everything sort of suddenly becomes visible to me. So what I'm using pen-wise to do this, I have these Staedtler pigment liners at 0.05 size. They're like those, very fine tip. Additionally, I may use these. I use these ones as well, these Micron, and these are in 0.5 size as well, and these ones are coloured, but I wasn't necessarily going to colour the layout, but I've got those to hand anyway. And then I've also got a slightly thicker pen. This is a Finalizing Tombow pen, which is a Japanese brand, and it has a slightly thicker end, which I may use that as well. And then I've got a really fine one, and this is actually called a needlepoint pen, another Japanese one by Otto, and that one has a very, very fine pen tip as well, so I'll be zooming in to use that where I need a really fine grid. And yeah, as I was saying, I'm going to try and sort of draw this out in a slightly better way with these key locations. So the first sort of tip I've got, if you're doing this adventure prep, and like me, I kind of based it initially on the layouts and then went back to do the filling out where the adventure is after I've started to sort of put the main geographic features in. One thing I need to do is actually make sure I leave space to write the names of places, and I'll generally just sort of drop them on in the right place. So for this, I've got one of these little stamps. So I could draw this sort of scroll, or I could stamp it. So in this instance, I'm going to stamp it, because any sort of quick tip to make things work out a little bit easier for me, I can use. And then I'll draw around this with the layout as I go in. So otherwise you end up doing the whole map and then realise you haven't put the labels and names on, and there's no room for it. So yeah, so this is a little stamper, and I'll just put them in there. So the Oblex, which is this massive cube, which is at the centre of this adventure really. If I can zoom in as well now, then I'll get everything in focus down in the right place. That's a bit better. So yeah, the Oblex is in the centre of this, in a massive great ravine that runs through. Think more canyon style in terms of that ravine running through the middle. So I'm going to put that basically in the centre, and hopefully I can line this up so that it doesn't look too... Have I just inked that? Yes, I have just inked that. So that's where the Oblex is going to be. Then I've got Cliff's End, which is the name of this village over here, so I'll just put that generally in this area. I've got Castus Falls, which is another sort of significant location. The falls at the head of this canyon, so just over there. Copenhagen at the top here. This was this dwarven place in a kind of a mountainous region, so I'll put that right at the top. And Old Cass was the name of the river, so I could probably put that on as well, just to represent the fact that that's where the river flows. And then finally I've got Howling Tower over there, which is like a wizard's tower, and I defined that wizard on the adventure layout in the last one. So there we go. So basically that means I've now got my name locations in, which I shall draw around so as to leave that out. There's one other thing I wanted to put on. I'm not sure if I've got enough room on there yet, which was just like a title plate using this skull rubber thing. And I could put that on the bottom actually, so get rid of that. Starting to get like really blackened fingers from that. Yeah, so seriously working on the crafting here with this stamping situation. Let's go. So yeah, I might have that coming off the bottom just so you can sort of see the skull hands on there, just as a nameplate for the map really. That'll do the job. So now that's going to haunt me by making me get a blackened hand off it, so I'll stick it over there on a pad out of the way. So Scarpsea is the name of the place. I'm not going to do any of the writing. Well, I might do the writing to sort of help guide me. So basically, yeah, I'm going to do this in a very simple capitalized style, because I'm not great at the calligraphy stuff. So this is the Oblex. I'm already failing on my simplicity. So Cliff's End, Old Cass, which is the name of the river. I'm starting to see myself adding a style to my simple writing. Howling Tower over. Oh, Howling Tower's up there. Putting that across 2 levels. Tower. My G on the Howling's not great. Coburn, which is the sort of dwarven place up here. Mine. And the falls at the head of the ravine. Falls. See, as you can see, my technique is not brilliant. Of course, the whole setting, I will write the name of the whole setting on their bottom down here, which was Scarpsing. Taking a bit more care with this. Will I fit it in? That's the question. If this lines up, I will be amazed. We'll have obviously got a newfound skill at getting, well, I did my A bit large on the end. So one of the things I might do later on is just add little bits on those to make them look a little bit more, which I'm ending up doing now, more calligraphic, even though I've got no technique in that. So there we go, there's the layout. Then I've got to get this map done. So I've got the ravine through the middle, and just as a reminder on the bigger map thing to zoom into this area just here, if you focus on that, this is the obelisk, which is this massive unusual obsidian rock inside the canyon where the river sort of makes its way around, the river Old Cass, inside the canyon. So this was like a focal point for the adventure, the obelisk, and so that's going to be right in the middle, as I said there. So shift that back out of the way again. So on my tiny map that I did here, I had the obelisk down as a little tiny square on there. And I'll probably fill a hex. So actually scale, that's something I haven't really gone into. So these are 2 centimetre hexes. And I was thinking, even though I'm going to represent things quite large, so like maybe I'll do a village and I'll do a village hall or something as a little sketch on there, and it might fill half of that 2 centimetre hex. But it's just representative of maybe a whole 2-mile region within there. I think that's quite useful, actually, going for a 2 centimetre plus actually it being 2 miles at the same time, so it's kind of centimetre a mile. But yes, as I said, in terms of the hexes, they could then be detailed further if you wanted to. So I could expand out the village hex, which would be a 2-mile area, and put more detail on farms and housing and things on there. But I'm not doing it this size. It's kind of zoomed out to be able to see the whole thing. So do I put my scale on now or worry about later? I think I'll worry about that later rather than sticking on the scale and then finding myself thinking, actually, I could do this at 3 miles per hex or something, in which case I'll end up a bit stuffed. But I'll go with it as it is for now. So right, I've got to start now drawing. And I did prepare myself earlier by doing a kind of another random sketch out of it, which I'm not going to show everybody here, but I'm going to have it up in front of me so I can see what I'm doing as I sketch without causing too much of a bother here. So yeah, so initially with the obelisk being here, I'm probably going to dump it in this square as a representation, as a sort of a sketch drawing. The other thing is I'm going straight in with pen, no worries about pencil, which means I'm going to make mistakes, but you know, you make the odd mistake and you just have to roll with it, don't you? So, right, so knowing that I'm going to do the ravine around it, I'm going to stick the obelisk in here. Quite simple really when something's a nice cube. Oh, the other thing I'm going to do is, because I'm not, you know, I'm not a big hex gamer. I mean, the fact this is on a hex shape is, in terms of map layout, I'm not going to totally lock everything in there. So like I said, with this being a scale of about 2 miles across, this is like an iconographic style symbol representing this weird stone obsidian statue, no, obsidian temple of sorts in the middle here. And it's filling a 2 mile square. It's certainly not 2 miles big. It's probably like 500 foot across by 500 or something in terms of size wise. But again, just making it nice and bold on the map. So from a descriptive perspective, you can look at the map and boldly see where these things are. Right, so enough of the waffling. I need to now start to draw some kind of ravine along the back here. So I'm just going to sort of make it quite jagged and sharp as the top of the canyon, so to speak, or ravine. And as I said, I'm just going to draw around the scrolls and things that I did down there. And I'd normally use the pen a little bit more upright, but I'm trying to involve the listener or the viewer so that you can see that as I work. So the reason for this sort of unusual jagged edges just means as a ravine I can sketch in on that to give it a look of an escarpment sort of style, which I'll sketch off there, but I'll just get the outline in now. And also I want to split the ravine up here with some sort of mid rocky region. So the top of this edge, so if I'm giving it some sort of perspective, so we head up to the falls area there, the top of it will just be at the bottom edge of the object inside the ravine, so as to sort of give me a view that it's in there, you know. But if I go through the edge of the labels I've put on, that's fine for me. So over this side, I'll say this is a much narrower ravine. So from a river perspective, the river won't split here. This will be like a dry riverbed or something from a previous channel that river once flowed down perhaps, but it will be going off to this more northerly section. And that reminds me also, I probably need to put like a north, south, east, west thing on here, but basically north is going to be that way. I just want to see that things are in focus as well. Yeah, that's not too bad. I need a drink now. Right, so the obelisks, I need to continue. Oh, there was one other pen, which I can show later on, but I've got these pens called Copic sketch pens. And on one side, they have a brush tip. I'm going to use that for shading later as well. You don't need to use a Copic. There's lots of brush pens around if you just search on Amazon or on any hobbycraft type store for brush pens and get a light grey. That's sort of ideal. But this colour that I'm using is called N3, number 3, neutral grey, if you so wish to get exactly the same pens. Right, continuing then. So main features, Howling Tower over there. So how am I going to draw the Howling Tower? I think I'm going to give it a, should I put it up to the top of that square? Yeah, I think I'll put it up this way. So again, it's obviously representative of a larger tower of sorts in there, but it's not like a mile across, even though this is a 2 mile zone. Just sort of do a hill maybe. Also put a smaller building beside it. So then we have a small tower representing a wizard's tower up there. Cliff's End then, which has a river. So we have a river called the Old Pole, which I won't put a full-size label on for, but it's just going to be a narrow river that's spilling down that way over into the ravine or canyon. And let's see, so Cliff's End, if I draw it from here, I think, yeah. So if I start to sketch out a little town. and maybe put a couple of other smaller buildings around the edge here too. And then, so around the edge of Cliff's End, I've still got some more drawing I'd like to do on there, as in, it's a case of the more you can put on little details, the better it will be. But I'm going to do the river coming along the side here. So if I do this, because it's kind of a narrow river, and bring it down the edge of Cliff's End, scooch underneath the label I've put on there. So that's going to be where Cliff's End is. I'm going to do a bridge over over the old pole, which is the name of this here. So I'll stick the bridge. Where shall I stick the bridge? Just here. So representative of a method to get across there. Then I think I'm going to have some sort of strip farm type things along the edge here. So if I stick in, how am I going to do those? I think I'm going to do those with like a random sort of hatching. So sort of representation of a farm of sorts. In fact, I could draw another building on the edge of there just to sort of say that maybe that's a farm area there in that location. So yeah, Cliff's End is coming along as in terms of a village. Next up, probably some hills down to the south of Cliff's End. So let's get some sort of hills down there. Just doing these as kind of low bumps, lowland type hills. Again, as I do this, I can build up the detail, so I don't need to go straight in with lots of like shading. Maybe some sort of larger hills over the back here. Around the edge of this river, so maybe I do feel like I should widen this river a tiny bit, I'm not sure, just to give it more detail, but I'll say to the edge up here that we've got potentially some marshy kind of areas either side of the river. And then maybe some more down to the south here as well, if I do a sort of similar. So geographically, obviously, I'm not following any kind of rules here, but potentially Cliff's End is on slightly higher ground with the hills around it, which has lifted it out of this kind of maybe boggy area around the edge of the small river down there. And then I'll continue, maybe I'll continue the hills up there later. Right, so some forest as well now, so let's get started on doing some little forests. So these I'm going to do as kind of bundles and then add trees underneath them. And it's going to be done super quick. I think I mentioned before, what I don't want to do is get trapped in a I must make each hex specific thing. So I don't want to like be driven by the hexes to say, well, that's just hills in that one, without sort of blending the edge. And the same with this sort of farmland area here too. So it's a case of trying to break it down a bit as I work through. Break up those borders so they're not just one block of forest or river or whatever it happens to be. So that's a start to the forest. Then what do I do next? Well, what I do next is I go in with very tiny strokes underneath to look like the trunks of the forest trees. I'm noticing a strange, weird approach where I'm tending to put lots of clusters of 3 together when I should maybe build up slightly larger clusters of trees. The other thing is I can go in along the bottom of them with just a little bit of sketchiness, almost letting my old edge shaking, nervous shaking, take over the drawing for me there. It just sort of adds some shade underneath them. Again, you could take an awful long time doing this if you were bothered, but because I'm trying to do this as a quick sketch, I don't mind that it's a bit rough and ready. Right, so I also think I want some forest down this way, so I'll do the same, a cluster of forest around here, and I'll just get them on as I did before, where it's kind of lollipop style of slightly fluffy treetops. And of course this is deciduous forest as well, isn't it? So probably some down this way, make it a little bit sparse around there. I mean, the more you cluster these together, the denser it perhaps is. So yeah, straight on now with the little bits underneath. But I wonder if I could zoom into that a bit more so you can see specifically what I'm doing in one area. Yeah, that might be better. Yeah, so you can see how small these little strokes are underneath for the tree trunks. Is that coming in? Yeah, that's about visible. I've got my camera in there now because that's zoomed in. You don't necessarily have to do 2 little trunk sections per tree. You could do more. So that's a slightly forested area to the south of the village as well as to the north of Cliff's End. And I'll just whiz along as I did before with that slightly shaky hand doing the bottom shading. So what you can do as well is you can do the occasional one where you sort of do some little dots up it as well, just to break up the individual. Gives it a bit of extra detail, I suppose. As well as these trees, I'm going to do the mountain range in the top. So I'll do that as a kind of a spine style mountain range. I don't often do these maps. I mean, this is probably far too detailed for me, but since I've got time off at the moment, I'm not actually working, so It's a bit of fun drawing this out in a little bit more detail. So there's some trees. What else did I want to put in there? Then we've got, maybe I could do, yeah, give this wetter land here, maybe it spills over to some sort of lakes as well. So we could put a couple of lakes to the side there. And in terms of filling those in, it'll be a case of, I'll do the sort of ordnance survey style lake. And then I could again put some little bush type things around the edge. Just those sort of three-pronged marshy bushes. And you could put a lot more to sort of represent bulrushes or what have you. So a couple of little small rivers, lakes on the side there. Maybe they drain away as well. There's like a drain away stream. And that's a waterfall down into the ravine at the end. Right, so it's slowly being, I feel like I need another set of fields, maybe just that they scatter some fields over this way, so there's some strip fields over here. And then maybe over this way as well. A couple of hills. So Howling Tower's done. The Castus Falls, right, so I was thinking that there would be a sort of a lake at the top here. I wonder also that we maybe need some more escarpment or something along there, another height level to the ravine. And then the falls themselves, just do a sort of a larger edge to represent the fact that there's maybe a larger river that spills out. And again, it's kind of more pictorial than it is being accurately sized there, that the falls go down. In fact, that's leading me on now to doing the river in the ravine as well, maybe the sort of slightly sharper rocky area where the falls come down. And then that obvious split where the river has to pass by the obelix on its way down the ravine canyon. Have it sort of disappearing around here. And then sort of similar to the water style I did in there, I'll just do some lines down through it as well. This is a question really, should I colour? Should I be using any colours on the river? I don't know. I was thinking that the whole thing would be black and white really. So yes, maybe the river pools a bit there at this branch, but we'll see. Right, so now over to the kind of escarpment on the back here to make this try and look a bit like it's a ravine. Oh, hi Todd. I don't know the law. Are you making these town names up? Yeah, I mean, I did a video the other day, Todd, actually, where I was working through, if I can just press the right button over here, I'll be able to show you what I was up to. So go to my Raspberry Pi here. So yeah, I was basically drawing out an adventure called Beneath the Valley of the Ultra-Knolls, which ended up with 2 sets of knolls. I managed to do that, but there you go. Yes, so Ultra-Knolls, interesting. I must have copied and pasted secretly without seeing it. But yes, so I was sketching out an adventure, and essentially the introduction to it is that there's a village called Cliff's End, which is a human village. It uses the river local to it for fishing and has farm fields to the east, which I was just drawing out on the desktop view. So these are the farm fields that are drawn out on here. The villagers trade with the Dwarven mines in the north, and the Dwarven mines are called the Copenhagen. But I haven't put them onto the map yet, but they're up further up to the north. And then finally there's a wizard's tower with someone in there called Ulag Jackdaw, the ancient wizard who resides in the Howling Tower. So it's a kind of general background as a judge background to this. I've got the whole setting I've just called Scarpsea, and there's a large river in the ravine, and there's this big giant cube called the Oblex, which is right in the middle of the ravine, which I have drawn onto the desktop here. And this is like an obsidian, huge black block, when everything else around here is sandstone style, Grand Canyon style redstone, whereas right in the middle here is this obsidian block. The only entrance on it is this unusual cut-in stairway that heads down on the top there. So the question is, in terms of as the adventure evolves, which I was creating in the last one, was this Oblex stone here before the ravine and the waterfall and then the erosion took place over millennia, or is this something that was magically dropped there, right in the middle of the river in there? So that's kind of where I was going with it. I haven't quite finished the background yet, but essentially I did start to detail the dungeon layers inside the Oblex itself. And as I worked through that, I discovered that as I was rolling, that we've got a god in there, which was a goddess called, as I've come down, Odinia, a goddess, Odinia. And that she'd been stuck in there and was weakened because she didn't have any followers, because they thought she was dead, because she's imprisoned in here. So the plot was sort of evolving on the basis that the players may go down into there for whatever reason. They may be villagers that have decided to go there, or some other encounter. I haven't got to that sort of side of things yet. And when they do get down there, they will encounter a goddess, and then she'll have certain motivations, like the namesake of the adventure, because the adventure is called come back up, Beneath the Valley of the Ultra-Knolls. Her old followers I'm going to have further down in there. They're going to be the Ultra-Knolls that used to follow her but don't anymore, which is why she's weakened. Anyway, that's something I haven't detailed out enough on the plot yet. And today I just thought, oh, why not sketch out the map in a bit more detail just for a bit of fun. So that's where I am today, just sketching out the map rather than focusing on the adventure. But things from the adventure may pop into my mind, and I'll drop over to the other screen if that does happen. So, and the names, Todd, the names come from a sheet of mine that I've had for years that I've now put into Google Sheets, where I have a variety of different character names. I have location names, and I just roll them on here. So I'd sort of roll the dice, come up, and then the names would appear on here, and depending on whether I like them or not, I'll then drop them into the game as well. So this particular sheet here has lots of names for characters. It has a male name, and then a female name, and then a surname. So yeah, that's what I'll use as a reference sheet, and then throw in some other random names while I'm at it as well, which is what helped me fill out the names on the sheet in the first place. So back over then to the desk. I shall now continue to draw this ravine. As I said, I'm going to try and make this look like a large escarpment area without it looking too much like a mountain. And of course it's quasi 3D, isn't it, the style I've done there, in the sense that, and that's probably why I ended up naturally going for this extra section of ravine in the middle there, because it kind of again represents the fact that I can make it look slightly 3D looking by putting sections on there. So the other thing I might do from the edge of this ravine here is just do the odd sort of crack coming back from the edges as well. Because this area to the north is going to be more mountainous, I thought, well, maybe a good way to sort of handle that would be to make it more slightly drier earth sort of style as well. And then at the bottom I might put, just again to represent that there's escarpment down there, maybe the odd boulder as well. The challenge with any sort of 3D element is then what do you do when you try and break away from the 3D? It just looks a bit unusual, but since it's like a central focus for the game, for the map, I'll just leave it on there as it is. So I don't want to do too much shading on it at the moment, so that's probably enough to sort of show where we are. Because I could put little bits like that. Sort of thicken the edge here so as to sort of show that there's some depth over it. Do little scrub things as well on the top there to make it look like, okay, that's the edge of the top of a cliff. Some bush and some scrubland, the old tree. Okay, so right, mountains then. So if I slide everything down a bit to get the top in, this is Copenhagen in the top, which is going to be where the dwarves are, with a mine, and they'll be trading with Cliff's End down here. And how they get there, though, is another matter. Maybe there's some sort of giant bridge that's over here. That's a consideration, or probably like a ferry or some kind of rock. That'll do. Massive giant stepping stones or something along the top over here with a makeshift wooden bridge has been made over it or near the falls. If I think back to, say, the Victoria Falls in Africa, I know they have kind of a lot of islands and islets and things along the top and very shallow water, so perhaps that's where they've built something across there to be able to head up to this area. Otherwise the construction of a bridge this size right across a massive canyon would be quite challenging. Right, so right, got to try and draw now a spine of a mountain up in this top section, so let's try it. So really it's just a case of, okay, so I'm drawing a spine. But there will be bits that head off other areas of spine perhaps. And then maybe at the top here, I had thoughts of a caldera, like the remains of a volcano or something. So maybe I could just sort of go around the top. And another sort of mountainous area in front, which is where and now I'll just draw on, I'm going to sketch on like a entranceway to, with a door or something and a plinth in front of it. That normally signifies an entranceway. So yeah, that's the entranceway to the Dwarven Mines, which I think I detailed out on the little little background thing I did in the census. I think it's an ore mine really for gold and silver. So that's Coburn Arc. There's the start of this spine of mountain. So I'm going to do another spine over the back, heading off that way, and then maybe a lone mountain sort of region at the bottom here. Right, so now filling in a spine. So how am I going to do that? Well, it's just a case really of finding a spot where you could just sort of draw off a mountain peak. So there's one there. Find a mountain peak section and then sketch around it. No means does it have to be perfect, but as you slowly sort of put it in, it kind of forms its shape. You know, some of it, like the background I've done there, is a little bit more traditional landscape. It's come out, hasn't it? As in, you can see the location of the Dwarven mine. Obviously, as I said before, this is like, these hexes are 2 miles across I've gone for. But that door is no way to, you know, like a mile across or anything. It's just a symbol again to show that's the location. And I shall stop waffling about that and continue on the mountain drawings. So even though perspective wise it's getting a bit wacky, you can obviously go over the back there as well. So come up to that section and then draw a mountain piece coming off. Now, some of it's looking a bit abstract, isn't it? Like it's a background piece rather than a mountain range, but I think it works to a degree. And then I think the other thing to do is to sort of naturally bring in some lower hills at the bottom beneath it. That don't necessarily need to be connected. And this bit I'm liking as a kind of a valley or something in there. Maybe even got some water in there. Too late, I've drawn a lake. Randomly generated a sort of mountain lake of sorts in there, which obviously maybe that's why the dwarfs have settled up there as well. So where does a mountain finish and end? I like the idea that the Wizard's Tower is sort of surrounded by a mountainous region. So shading on these up here now, I've got sort of different ways I could do it. I'm going to take the tiny pen, this is the pen which I mentioned earlier, which is called a needle point by Otto, Japanese pen. It really has a scratchy needle at the end. I've no idea what size it is, but I'm sure it's smaller, I think, than the Stedler 05, which I was using for everything else. And that can be used then for tiny, because like different bits and pieces, like I could scratch in some hatching around the side of the little areas like that, fill in. But then also do some against the mountain. So I probably want to consider maybe the light's coming from the left over this way, and therefore I'll want the shading on the kind of southeast side of the mountain. So let's just think about what that would look like. So basically just do some scratching with this tiny needle pen like that to represent the darker areas. And that can continue as I can scratch on the side of these hills as well with this tiny needle pen. Anywhere I like really, so the side of this building as well. So I've kind of auto gone into shading mode now without really even thinking about it, but yeah, that's where I am now. I think those mountains are big enough. I think I've got enough trees and things down there, and it's also worth, with a map like this, leaving some of it ready to do, isn't it? Because you know, this isn't designed for a hex crawl game. This is designed for like a high adventure game with a few key points on the map. But if you did so wanted to make it so that something was a little bit more interesting to be discovered, you could add that on later. So I was just thinking, actually, I might do some farm fields over here just before I start on this sketching, shading. Maybe another little farmhouse type building. And you know, perhaps there's some standing stones. I mean, who knows how long this place has been there, but if I just do some rocky standing stone type things over here, maybe put a classic standing stone style with a few more. And they can be shaded up as well, and that just again representative of a sort of standing stone thing near the village that could be something I detail in the adventure, or it could just be left there. And interestingly enough, maybe they're made out of the same black obsidian as the obelisk itself, which is more ancient than the village and the other surrounding locations. So a bit of a mystery there if the players do encounter this standing stone. Could be some ghosts or some other interesting burial mounds. That's a fact. I should do maybe some burial mounds there as well. The villagers have got to be buried somewhere, haven't they? Barrows. Yeah, burial mounds behind the standing stones. Another sort of classic trope, isn't it? Well, not trope, but just a anthropomorphic thing, as in like you maybe worship somewhere and then bury people nearby. Right, continuing on the mountain shading. As I said, I'm used to using this scratchy small pen on one side to sort of represent the fact that the sun's coming from the other angle, so that the southeast side of the mountains might have this shading on. It just adds some shape to some of these as well, doesn't it, where there might not be much of an image of a mountain there, I'm drawing it in with some shading while I'm working. Now this one's worked out quite nicely for me because I did that lake down there, and maybe there's some sort of waterfalls or streams coming down there. It's getting a bit messier over this side with lots of sort of smaller valleys and things. but it is filling up. So how long have I been going? I've been going now 57 minutes, so nearly an hour. So that's not bad for an hour's work, is it? As in, yeah, I've just done that whole thing in an hour. I've got my main locations on. I've done a significant amount of shading. I do want to continue the shading though before I move on to any more of writing the adventure piece that goes with this. And obviously I'm doing this live, which means you're just hearing me chatter away. Yes, I say no harm in extending shading beyond the edge of where you may have drawn a piece of mountain, because it kind of gives it a bit of shape. Yeah, over here. And I've got these hills over here too, and I'll put the same, continue the same as in right hand side really. I mean, I was saying things like south and east and stuff earlier, but really I just meant the right hand side of the mountains and hills will have the shade on them, just for simplicity. And using a smaller pen, obviously that finer pen just sets it off slightly differently as well, as in you can see that it looks more hetchy, doesn't it, with the tiny scratches that I'm putting in with this Horizon Otto needle point pen. It just again looks different. If I did it with a thicker cut, with a thicker one, which I was using for the main lines, it would just look really blobby. Right, now I can see really straight away that the massive ravine / canyon in the middle is the one thing that's standing out, because it hasn't had that shading on, even though I've got the sort of river through there. So I'll now do the same really with the edges of the ravine too. Maybe focusing more along the top of it, because otherwise I could risk it all starting to look like mountains again, couldn't I? That's something I want to try and avoid. Maybe a few more cracks going up here. If anything, I may not have put that feature in, although it looks like a hill there. Because it sort of distracts from the top of this. Okay, so maybe a bit more escarpment drawing along the bottom. These stamps that I put on earlier, just again giving them a little bit of detail by scratching on the pen to give them shading as well. You may notice I start one thing like I was starting that escarpment thing there, then I've gone to something a bit easier. That's my classic approach to things. Right, stepping back from it, and I can't see it at all because these are close-up glasses. Right, how's it looking? Not too bad. Again, I think I just feel I need to go along here and darken in these areas. Edges of the cliff. Could do some sort of large bouldery type things, more hills on here too, couldn't I? Maybe the odd spindly tree or something. Slightly more barren looking trees than It's filling in slowly. You know, I'm speeding it really, aren't I? I mean, it's this isn't being done for like showcase standard or anything. Yeah, so a little odd crack or something there. I feel like maybe some conifer style trees here, a sort of different shape to the other. Sort of diamonds really, aren't they? Getting my eye in on those conifers, right. Should really have used the fatter pen for these to sort of bring them in line. May go back and use that for the shading and things, just to sort of bring them in line with the trees, the coniferous trees, sorry, the deciduous style that I did towards the bottom of the map in terms of weight of the pen work. I'm doing kind of little dots up the middle of them, don't know why, it just feels right. Yeah, so more alpine style towards this end of the arrangement. I think that'll do, won't it, really? Oh no, pen shading, yeah, that's the last thing I'll just show. So this is using Copic Sketch that I've got, another Japanese pen, and this is the brush side, and you can just search for brush pens. You don't need like a really fancy expensive one like this. I think these are a couple of quid or more each. You can get these refilled though, they have like a method you can refill them as well. So with this, I'm just going to go around the top of the mountain areas again, just to sort of fill in a bit of darker shading. Again, not spending much time doing it. It's not about doing it perfectly. You know, I was just thinking while I'm doing these sort of hill shading that could do a couple of pathways as well, maybe. So that's just sort of darkening the top of those mountains a little bit. I could also go around the edge of the ravine bit as well. I guess I haven't done the falls in much detail as well, especially if like I said earlier, there might be a passage like Victoria Falls style around the top of them. That bit's a bit weak, but I'm happy enough with it. And the other thing I could do is just some delicate shading under the trees as well with this. And it can be both under the trees and on the bottom of the bushy bits. And around the standing stones here as well. and the barrow mounds at the back there. No harm in defining them a bit with a bit of the shading pen. I mean, this is really kind of a cheap hack as well, as in like a really quick way to get some shading in. You know, I'm doing it really quickly. Some places just putting a blob. What's this for? Married Man Gaming. It's for a game called Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I've got the book somewhere around, but I haven't got it right there with me. Yeah, but Dungeon Crawl Classics is a role-playing game. Let's have a look. For some reason I've got Google thingy up there. So this is Dungeon Crawl Classics. If I go to the first page of the book here, I've got the PDF up. It's a role-playing game. It's a bit like Dungeons & Dragons. It's based off version 3X. In terms of Dungeons & Dragons versions, it uses the Open Gaming license, so they've rebuilt this. It was published in 2012 by Goodman Games, and they've now had sort of 7 or 8 years of publishing that in a row. Every year I think they bring out a new version with a slightly different cover, but the rules stay the same. They just sort of tweak and adjust the typo and layout slightly, but basically the book stayed the same for the last 8 years. So this map, which I'm just laying out here, if I show the desk again, in the previous video I did of this, this was the map. So basically, when I'm creating the initial adventure, it's really a case of just sketching out locations, and I sort of had this idea of this massive obelisk, like an obsidian stone in the middle of the ravine through the centre of it, which I'd sketched out on there. I came up with the names of the locations, and then I thought, I know, I'll just detail it a bit more and do a little bit more extra drawing on there. I just realised I could do some shading down there as well. Yes, so that was the idea. I was writing an adventure, and in between about an hour and a half of doing it in the last session, I switched backwards and forwards to my Raspberry Pi, which is a little single board computer here, just this tiny box in the corner, and I'm running a browser on there, and that's where I've got these various apps up. So I generated some dungeon, in amongst other things. I've got a dungeon generated on there. So, oh yeah, thanks Ralph for popping in. Erasable's Corner. Awesome, Robin. I've spent hours studying token maps there. They are never as detailed as I want them to be, but this looks really good. Oh, thanks for popping in, Erasable. And Ralph, yes, I'm glad you like the map. So basically I'm putting a venture together called Beneath the Valley of the Ultra-Knolls is the name of it, and this is the layout as I'm building it out in terms of doing a bit of background. That there's this massive cube in the middle of the map, which has some sort of magical history to it, and it's also the main dungeon. And I decided today, why not do a map in a bit more detail for it, which I can scan and then throw into this, which I was just going to do as a free set of adventures for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And today, that's Cliff's End, that's the little village which I used an automatic generator to create. And then I've gone through and I'm starting to populate some of the creature stats using Dungeon Crawl Classics rules as well. So no, the dungeon map actually is it's from a website called One Page Dungeon, and I'm trying. Why does it say LinkedIn at the top there? So yeah, One Page Dungeon is a site where you can download. So if I press E on here, I might get my keyboard out. Yeah, I'll make it available, Ralph, as a free download on the Roll RPG now, or Drive Through RPG, one of the various ones. So you can export these maps from One Page Dungeon. So I've just exported that by pressing the E key to export it. But then a simple enter on this should give me a new map. There you go. And you can just keep hitting enter, and it keeps firing up new maps for me until I find one that's about right. So this one looks right for me because the obelisk in the center of this layout that I'm doing here is square. Obviously I want quite a square layout, so that looks like a good level 2 to me, so I'm going to export that. as well. So that should have downloaded. Let me just check that he's exporting. Yeah, it is to export ping. So as soon as I press E, it saves that as a downloaded ping file, which I can then use. And they give you sound on this nice site, which is called, it's a procedural generator that this guy's done, and by this chap called, what's his name? Nipui. Oh, it can be, oh, that's what the system is that you can import. Actually, if I do Shift F5, that should refresh the page. Don't want Google Keep or Hangouts. That's it. That's what I wanted, so that I could show you the actual URL up there. It's waterboo.itch.io, and that's where you get the dungeon generator, and you can download those and stick them in. So again, every time I hit enter, it regenerates a random one. So yeah, so tonight was just drawing the map, which I'm going to scan before I come back and do the third part of this, because this is like it's turned into a three-parter to try and finish this off. Obviously, I've detailed some of the dungeon on here already, and I've got the rooms, and I've got a few bits of other information which I can go through another time. But I'm quite pleased that I've done about an hour and a half now, I think. An hour and 15 to get the drawing done of Scarpsea area, which I'll scan and throw in there. Oh, that's okay. Married Man Gaming. That's an interesting name. So, the other thing is I've left some areas on here. I know what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to do like the fact that I said before, which is I wanted some roads or trails. And I'm going to do the trails as a kind of a little dotted line going through. And say if this area at the top of these falls has a kind of a bridge over here, it means that maybe that's a toll bridge, and I'll stick a little building on there as well, an inn or something. There's stables, and another section of that pathway or trail will head up towards the standing stones in the burial area, and then potentially just have it arcing around the back of the village as well, heading off the map to somewhere new, and then continue the trail over the back edge here. And maybe it goes through a sort of valley towards the Howling Tower. Just to show that the trade route is there with the dwarfs in their mountain mine up here. So yeah, that's just sketched on a couple of little details. I could maybe put a couple of trees down here as well. How long have you been doing? Any tips for a beginner? Well, I've been doing 1980, about 1980, 82 maybe, 82. So that's probably, what's that? 30. It's about 38 years. So I don't often do maps, though. I tend to sort of use published modules and things. I just decided to give this a go because I do a lot of painting of miniatures, so I'm quite used to sort of handling pens and brushes and things. So I thought I'd give it a go, since it's not too hard to just get started and then see where you end up. So Oldcast, that's the name of the river. The obelisk is the stone thing in the middle. Castor's Falls is the big falls that go down and form the ravine and canyon below there. Cliff's End, the name of the village. Howling Tower, a wizard's tower over here. Maybe you arrive to study the obelisk. And we've got a trail running through. I don't think I really need to do much more now. I had a kind of a mountain thing up there. Maybe I should just fill that in, actually, because otherwise it does just look like a weird a weird line at the top that doesn't have any purpose, and it does just mean then that the mountains have a kind of a background. I'll use the skinny pen to do that. Decoration and starts, yeah, I know what you mean. Maybe that I could do a scroll or something, or just even sketch in some broken bits, like it's an old sign or something. But yeah, I painted a bit. Don't find time for gaming. The stream is fueling my inspiration. Oh, hopefully, yeah, hopefully you'll get a get some inspiration to give it a go yourself. And say my inspiration at the moment is because I lost my job at the start of the lockdown, and didn't get sort of renewed on a contract because everything was on lockdown. But so I've got more time, so I thought I'd do a few things like this that I enjoy doing while I wait for the job market to pick up again. But yeah, I do role play every week anyway, so, or every other week depending on gaming friends. And we do that online now. So there, I've got some mountains in the background as well, just to sort of show that they do go off in that direction. Although I didn't sort of do much detail on them, it's just nice and quick really. I know what I'm missing there. It needs a bit going over that way. Yeah, so I haven't really got a name for the mountains. That could be another thing, because Copenhagen is the name of the dwarven home there, and mine. I could put a name on there, but I think that's enough, and I left enough room for other locations on there. Maybe some other things within the mountains are worthy of a visit. We've got the lake beside the mountains, which I haven't given a name to. We've got a forest leading off up this way in terms of more coniferous style, and then the valley itself down in the middle. So let's see how that looks zoomed out. Yeah, as I say, size-wise, these are 2 centimetre size hexes, and this is just paper that I bought on Amazon. There was a sheet of hex paper with those sizes on there, and then for reasons of being able to scan this in, I made it A4 in terms of this limit of this hex is A4, or American letter size essentially, so that I could now put this on my flatbed scanner and then scan it in, and then maybe shrink it slightly as well, so that it could fit on an A4 page. And by shrinking it a bit, it's going to tighten up some of the scratchings that I've done on there as well. So probably, thinking about it, I could make this Castor's Falls, because where I've done water in other locations, I have put lines on it, so I'll just do that here as well, just to say that that is a body of water. And then actually I could put little bush things at the side maybe. So there we go, just so that that is representative of a body of water. And if we have a look down, I'll have a look at the village again in detail, just see what I've got going on there. So yeah, just around this place, Cliff's End. I did think about doing a church or something, but I won't bother with that. I've got a bridge over the river, a couple of bit areas of farmland, and just for the farmland I did like etching in one direction and another. Well, the size I was going for, which I was working on, which I haven't written on because I haven't confirmed it yet, but I was thinking each hex, which is a 2 centimetre hex, would be 2 miles. So in terms of scaling and symbols on here, if that was a 2 mile hex across here, I mean the village itself is probably less than half a mile in size in terms of buildings, but I've just put it on there representative of the fact that that's the village area. So from a campaign perspective, it wasn't part of a campaign, more of just an adventure, so this could be thrown in anywhere. So the idea wasn't to make this a large campaign, but it could be extended out So what have we got? I think we've got, let me just see in terms of size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-ish. So, you know, what's that? It's going to be about 30 miles across in terms of size-wise. So it could fit into a larger campaign map. This is kind of a zoomed-in one with a specific adventure in mind, which I've been writing. So yeah, I'm going to do another one of these another day. So yeah, thanks for the question, Ralph. As I was saying, it's just one. That's why I did it on a hex as well, because it could be plugged into a much bigger world map. This isn't world building. This is adventure building in one specific area with a village and a relationship going between the two key locations on there. So yeah. Yeah, I think it's manageable for a reasonable size adventure with different locations. The players, we've got the barrows, we've got standing stones, we've got a lake over here, a dwarven host kind of location with a mine, and the Howling Tower over there as well. And then I've got my characters for this, which if I switch back to the Raspberry Pi computer as an introduction to it at the top of this, if I go right back to the top, yep, I've managed to paste in a URL, which is the one-page dungeon URL. So I'll leave that up there for a moment. So if anybody want to take that down, that's the one-page dungeon URL there. And so yeah, Beneath the Valley of the Ultra-Knolls is the name of it. If I can just put Knolls on there again, I've managed to scrub that out. And as a region, Scarpsea has several key locations. You can Cliff's End, the human village, with a narrow river called the Odd Pole running through it. The village uses the river for fishing and has farm fields to the east, which I've drawn on. The human innkeeper, I need to switch my glasses now. There's my close-up work ones. Oh, that's more like it. So human innkeeper Androst, which is a local, which is a Germanic name for a leader, like a seneschal or a marshal, a drost, is called Talis Salki. He runs the inn called the Taffy. The villagers trade with the dwarven mines in the north called the Kobanark. They have an uneasy relationship with Ulag Jackdaw, who's an ancient wizard who resides in the Howling Tower. So that's the overall locations. We've got Cliff's End, we've got Kobanark, the dwarfs, so the humans trade there, and the Howling Tower is where Jackdaw is located. So yeah, that's Ulag Jackdaw. He is a wizard in the Howling Tower. So sort of judge background to it. So within the Scarpsea region is a large river filled ravine fed by falls from the Castus Falls. The ravine is several hundred feet tall with about 6 miles between it and Cliff's End. There's an unusual anomaly in the canyon. This is the Obelix, a giant cube-shaped block of obsidian. It sits a few miles down from the Castus Falls, causing the river Cast to flow around it within the Redstone Canyon. Obviously, it also looks unusual because it's black inside a Redstone Canyon. It's going to be quite a striking image to come across. The Obelix cube itself is a good 600 foot tall, and the only visible entrance is on the top where gullbats nest. So I was trying to be creative because in the Dungeon Crawl Classics game, they encourage you to use different creatures and names, so I've gone up with gullbats. So if the characters manage to get down to the top of the Obelix where its entrance is, they will be faced with gullbats as their kind of first encounter before they dive in there. I don't know where that bit of text has come from there. I've said it's not clear whether the Obelix was there before the river eroded away the ravine, so essentially the river has been able to erode away the sandstone and left behind this strange Obelix block, or maybe it arrived later on as some sort of magic and appeared in the river. So far I've got a little adventure hook, which is the Obelix resides, inside the Obelix resides a slowly fading goddess called Idonia, and she is looking for help in rebuilding a following of agents. So she's imprisoned in there, and in the last episode that I did of this, I sort of did her background, trying to work out what her motivations were. And I have a few little notes on that. So essentially the Obelix has a first level. So if I try and bring my map picture back in there again, is that the right drawing? I think that's it. Yeah, so that's the first level of the map, and number 1 is the entranceway from the top of the Obelix as they come in, and 1A, which I haven't been able to put the A on there, is an initial room they can come into. So yes, the entranceway on the top has a streaming rainwater that comes in that soaks down. And then there's options to get into the top of the obelisk, include a paper wing. So Ulag Jackdaw, the wizard, has a method of flying down onto it, which is like a paper glider that the players can. I haven't decided how they would bargain with him for these, or whether he would employ them because he wants them to investigate the obelisk. But they would glide down, so they have to do some kind of agility roll to glide down onto the top of the rock before they can start the adventure. Then if we have a look to the north of section 1, where they walk down the steps in the cube, up here there's a water-filled room, and in that room, I detailed it in the last adventure, which is I put essentially the centre of the room features a 7-foot tall statue of a bull-horned man featuring a curled tail, so a sort of devil. The silver is tarnished but clear of some precious nature. And then the plinth, the stone platform, is sat in a pool of water that looks deep, 4 to 6 feet, which is kind of murky water. And inside that murky water is a giant crab. So I rolled that randomly. I used this monster alphabet and also the other book, which is from Goodman Games. So I used the monster alphabet and I used the dungeon alphabet as well, which enabled me to roll up that beast in there. So there we are. Sorry, I had an audio malfunction there where I pushed the book against the buttons. Right, so that's me developing this, and then in another room in down there we had some inscriptions and writing on the bottom of the silver statue in that room with a crab, which they might have to fight. And then there was also a trap. If they tried to rip any parts of the statue off, they would end up being in a kind of a collapsing roof trap type thing there. And then Idonea, the goddess, I've started to sort of detail out. The room she's in is obscured by a smoke-filled river showing a cowled figure on a pole-pushed small boat. So it's an illusion of her dreaming her past life. And then I rolled up that she was precognitive as well. But she is slowly disappearing. Currently only her eyeballs on stalks, her brain and vascular system are visible. So basically the view I had on Idonea as a goddess that's been enslaved or captured in this rock is that because she's been here so long, her followers have forgotten her and she's beginning to fade away. So she needs a certain number of followers before she can reform and come back to full strength. So as a goddess, she's currently very weak, and she's seeking followers. With enough people believing her, she'll become complete again. Now her followers are going to be, although I haven't got to that point of the lower levels of the dungeon, her followers are going to be the Ultra-Knolls, which are going to be an ancient race of people that are being held captive or controlled somehow further down in the dungeon. So I'll spec those out later on. And of course, when the players encounter it's going to be very interesting because she doesn't have a physical form, just being a brain, a pair of eyeballs, and a vascular system because she's fading away. So that's where I was with that at the moment. So I'll jump back to the map now as a wrap up because I think I've done enough tonight. So the next version of this, the part 3 to this series of hour-long videos will be me detailing the dungeon levels within the obelisk and then starting to spec out the adventure at the same time as well, so that the adventure's got a timeline and a plot. So, you know, who do they talk to in the village to find out? Are they just all villagers anyway? Because in the style of Dungeon Crawl Classics, you can start at a level 0 game, so perhaps they're level 0 peasants in here that are going to try and mob the obelisk by flying down onto it with those paper wings to get at the money and whatever treasures they think are stuck within there, which is when they encounter the goddess, who may either help or hinder them, I suppose, depending on how they deal with her in their journey down through the different levels in the obelisk. And yeah, I've got some ideas of different things I want in there, including those kind of weird gnolls that are going to be her old followers that need to kind of relearn who she is to help her gain her power again. So there we go. I think I'd exit the dungeon immediately seeing her strange form. That is a possibility, yeah. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to wrap up then. I have just one last thing to do.